Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Ostrolenk. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show. I'm talking to Dana Codispoti. She's a personal crisis coach and CEO and founder of Fire. Good to see you, Dana.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this conversation. And I'm really curious, what is a personal crisis coach?
So, a personal crisis coach is kind of something I came up with. I'm sure it's not unique, but the way I describe it is really someone who is going through any type of crisis. And often people think crisis is like, catastrophic. Well, I don't really describe crisis as the thing you're going through. When we say crisis, we really think about it's the feelings that come with it, right? So it's feelings where you are feeling hopeless, feeling like you can't get through the challenge that's in front of you, like feelings of despair or feelings of being just completely stuck in your life. That can manifest in so many different things, whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's a loss of a job, a loss of a family member, just a certain phase of your life where you're feeling a certain kind of way. So personal crisis is your own personal crisis, however you define it.
Okay. Wow, that's great because I could imagine any one person you might consider X, of course, a crisis. Someone else might not consider it a crisis because it doesn't affect them necessarily the same way as the first person. Okay. It's very personal. Well,
Yes.
why personal, why crisis as the kind of the driver for your work?
So I went through what I considered my own personal crisis. To me, it felt like a crisis. Um, if it's okay, I'll share a bit of my story.
Please, pretty good.
But about almost 9 years ago, I was 2 weeks into a new job. I was I was this chief operating officer in HR for a big global company, had 300 people reporting to me, and I had just come off of maternity leave. So I had a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old at home. And I found myself having to leave my home at 3 in the morning with my two babies and literally not knowing what was ahead of us. So leaving an abusive relationship, really, just leaving in the middle of the night kind of thing. And it was like having to show up at work, just getting started, having to prove myself. And behind me, like I felt like the towers were crumbling. So it was like this immediate feeling of like, I'm in fight or flight. I'm in survival mode. I've just got to like get through every minute of the day, 1 minute at a time kind of thing. And frankly, I didn't view it as a crisis then, but in the rearview mirror, I was like, wow, I was really in crisis. And, long story short, without getting into all the details, I'm happy to answer anything. But, it turned into a 4-year court battle. So for 4 years, I was shuffling back and forth to court, trying to hold up my teams and really perform at work and manage the kids and, just all the work that goes into these court cases. And it was a very complex case involving a lot of different attorneys and different aspects of the case. And, during the process, every time I stepped into the courtroom, I just kept thinking, my God, if this is happening to me, someone who like most people thought I had it all together, on the outside, people were like, wow, she's killing it. She's doing amazing. And I kept thinking, if this is happening to me, what's happening to all these other women who may not have the same resources, support, courage, just wherewithal to kind of get through it. So it was in those moments I really was like, someday I'm going to get back kind of thing. I didn't know what that looked like or anything like that, but I just knew, these things, I firmly believe things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And even if you don't know why it's happening to you or for you in those moments, you figure it out eventually. Um, and so since then, I sit on the board of a victims assistance organization here in New York. And then, eventually started this personal crisis coaching work, which, we can get a little bit deeper into, but that's sort of how we got here.
What did you learn about yourself in your own personal crisis? You're this, I imagine 4 years gone through the legal system was not just it. Like there's things that led up to that whole thing, leaving the house, and you still some challenges.
Yeah, I learned a lot about myself. I come from an immigrant family. Everything is about education, working hard, grit, get your education, get a great job, keep performing. Perfectionism is expected. A lot of judgmental, comments here and there throughout your life. And, it's always like you grow up thinking like I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do that, right? So you're kind of just programmed and doing your thing. And I think I also grew up not really having a voice. In hindsight, I didn't know it, but I didn't really have a voice. It was kind of like, this is what you're going to do. This is your path and that sort of thing. But, I was always a little bit of the somewhat of a rebel in the family or, even though I walked the straight path, I always was kind of thinking something a little bit more unique than most of my family. So I think in this process, I really learned, first of all, to find my voice, right? It took me a long time, it's over 2 decades of a relationship that was really just unhealthy. And it took me a long time to just sort of break free from the patterns that I was used to. Um, I learned that I was courageous. I learned that I was extremely resilient. Um, I learned that I had so much more to myself than I had sort of portrayed in my life, and to anyone else, it was like my life was amazing, right? I was smart, successful, had tons of friends, great opportunities, traveled the world, lived overseas, just an incredible life. But there was so much more depth to me that I think was able to be unleashed process. Um, and I also learned, and I teach this often in my coaching, but we are all walking around with this incredible superpower called our intuition. And I think, so many of us ignore it for a long, long time, if not all the time. And I learned something very important, which was like my intuition was very loud, but I was ignoring it, so that's one of the things I like to emphasize in my coaching is how important it is to really connect with yourself and um, really pay attention to those signs and those signals, because in the rearview mirror, you're like, wow, I didn't miss, I ignored, this, the other. So, um, through this work, I mean, I've done a lot of work internally, a lot of spiritual work. And I've just learned to be so much more comfortable with all the parts of me, all the experiences I've had, and to look at things with a very different perspective.
You use the word resilience, you use the word courage, intuition. I like to unpack all those things for you. Was the courage something you discovered at 3 a.m., whatever morning that was? Or did you always know that you had this courage in you and just express itself in the very moment? I'll start with the courage piece.
Yeah, it's a great question because in a lot of ways, I was always courageous and sort of brave in weird ways, like with people. Like, how you grow up with people and you're like, I'm afraid or I'm intimidated by this person or that person. Like I was never that. Like my sister always used to laugh at me with this. Like we went to Catholic school, and all the nuns that everybody was like totally afraid of. Like I was like, whatever. Like she's just a human being, kind of thing. So I always had courage in that regard to just be a little brave in interactions. Traveling the world by myself. Like I was always very brave in that, but I wasn't in my relationships. I wasn't in standing in my power at all. Right. And that courage, I think, for me came out of nowhere, you know? It's a different kind of courage. And I remember it felt like an out of body experience where I was just, you know what I mean? And it was just time. And so unleashing that for me was a really big thing. And I think also, you know, I learned that as a kid, I never really learned to process anger.
So,
It was one emotion that I think I learned to stuff down because, in the family I grew up in, it was kind of like there's no space for that. There's no space, this is what you do and you do it, whatever. And, in a relationship with somebody also who doesn't allow you to express your own anger, like I had so much stuff down that, years later you're still processing that. But it was a pretty obvious observation I had that I was like, wow, I never actually learned how to process this particular emotion.
do you find out with clients you work with that anger is one, many emotions or a primary emotion that they also have? Is there like a theme in terms of developing the feeling process you allow?
Yeah, I think there's a theme of not giving permission to feel anger and other emotions, right? I think, um, as you know, I practice psychosynthesis, but the theme I find is that so many people are unaware that there's so many parts of themselves that are just like way in the back seat. And so often all those parts are just unrecognized, whether they're emotions or just characteristics, they're just not dealing with them. So that's more of the theme, I would say. But yeah, anger is definitely one of them that shows up a lot in terms of not being able to be processed.
So I got a course asking now about psychosynthesis since you brought it up.
Yeah.
Could you just share with the listening audience, like, I've enjoyed the conversation with you about that off the air because it's something I studied, a million years ago in grad school.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about psychosynthesis and how you use it in your coaching practice?
Sure. I think you'd probably do a better job at it, but I'm going to give it my way. But, psychosynthesis really teaches us about we all are made up of these different parts of ourselves based on experiences, how we were raised, and all the things. But most of us are walking around with one of those or a couple of those in the driver's seat. An example would be the perfectionist, which I certainly identified with most of my life. Like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a type A person. I'm this, I'm that. Another one would be the victim. We know a lot of people walking around in this world as the victim mentality and how all of that manifests in their life because they see the world as, or they see themselves as a victim in the world, right? So psychosynthesis allows us to really identify with all these other parts of who we are and bring them together with this sort of loving acceptance. Um, so that we're not so judgmental about ourselves and we can see ourselves for a lot more than the thing that's in the driver's seat. So that's how I kind of summarize it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that do you find that people in crisis give them even more ability to start recognizing parts of self they might have put in this data, but they come up as a result of the crisis they're in?
I would say yes if they're ready for the work. Yeah. I think, and most people that I work with or, we work with in our nonprofit are ready for the work because we are pretty selective in who we're working with because we are here to make impact. And I think this work is so important. And the more people we can help, the better. So, yes, I would say that they're able to do it once they step up to the plate.
And when you work with people in crisis, what are some of the things you try to cultivate in them, bring to the attention for the first or second time, or see skills they might need? Is there a general theme like, oh, it's really important to cultivate more resilience? And if so, like, how do you do that? Or courage, whatever it is.
Yeah. I think the first thing I start with most of the clients is radical acceptance. Because what happens is most of the time, if you're in this situation, whatever it is, you're like fighting against it. You're like, why is this happening to me? This is terrible, like this is miserable. I can't believe this is happening to me. You can't take that first step forward until you have radical acceptance of whatever, right? And that's step one, right? And sometimes that takes a while, right? Sometimes that really takes a while. Um, so then once we sort of get into the work, like I said, intuition is a big one that we work on. So I actually I developed what's called the RISE method, which is yeah, it's resilience plus intuition plus self-care equals empowerment. So we sort of break those things down, with I always say the I being the really, important part of this whole piece, is your intuition, because in the work, we do a lot of mindfulness work, really. How do you get in touch with your inner self? How do you get in touch with your intuitions to be able to leverage the superpowers that you have? We teach a lot about, the fight or flight responses, the tools that you can use to manage through that. We do, like I said, a lot of mindfulness work. We do visualizations. Um, we talk a lot about your support system. So how do you actually find your tribe? You know, One of the things I learned, and many people learn through a process like this, is often your tribe is not the people you expected. Your tribe to get through something that's your own personal crisis, which for you is feeling catastrophic, isn't always the tribe you thought it would be. And there has to be a radical acceptance to that too, because sometimes people just don't have the tools to support you in the way you need to be supported in the.
It's like the assumption could be, oh, family member or spouse or my BFFs. They don't necessarily play that role for you.
That's right. But what I can say with hand on heart is that that tribe comes along somehow, some way. Uh, it's often just someone new that comes into your life, or it's the colleague at work that you never expected, or it's, the angel that comes from the sky, I always say. And oftentimes it is the people you expect to, but I think there has to be an openness to realizing that's okay. And you don't have to be disappointed or resentful or angry that the people you expected or wanted to show up for you aren't. There's a reason, So again, it's opening your heart up to be able to say, I welcome the support, no matter who it is or what it is or what it looks like, because that is what I need in that moment.
And so rise, the intuition for you personally. How did you a coach or a therapist that helped you in this process as you were helping others? And if whether you did or not, like how did you get intuition back online and start trusting yourself?
Yeah. There's a couple things I did actually. So I've been working with a therapist for years, but frankly, she's more like my spiritual advisor. Uh, she's been in my life for 15 years, and she's really been like my spiritual anchor and guide in a lot of these things. So she was very instrumental in that for me. I think my coaching course that I took, practicing psychosynthesis, really helped me hone my intuition, right? Really get in touch with my inner self. So that was a really, really big one. And then practicing meditation, I should be doing it more than I am, but, meditation practices and really getting quiet, in the few times I can as, a single mama. Um, but I say solo mom really, but, so it's a lot of different things. But it's practicing it. It does take practice. And look, I think for me personally, I think, I've always had a pretty keen intuition. I just kept ignoring it, but it was there the whole time. I
So it's for you with the intuition, you like the gut sense, something that like just downloads in your mind. Like how does intuition show up for you?
yeah.
Like, a little shows up for everyone in bigger ways.
Yeah, I always say, yeah, it's a gut feeling. So I teach my kids all the time. I'm like, listen, if you're in a situation and you have this thing called your gut, and feels a little icky inside, like, you got to get out of there, right? So that's one. But I think your body tells you in physical, I feel like, your intuition manifests physically where your body just gets uncomfortable in some way. And I practice with my clients, if your body's feeling kind of uncomfortable, ask yourself why. Just
Mhm.
pause and ask yourself why. Because, like so many times we'll be like, oh, something pops in your head, like, yeah, don't do that. And you're like, you just push through and you just do it. And then later you're like, I shouldn't have done that. So it's kind of like, just listen to your body. I feel like it very much manifests physically. Sometimes it's a little voice in your head that says, go that way, go the other way, or whatever. But it's like, pay attention, or I believe in signs. There's signs everywhere, and, we can get into the more of the spiritual stuff, where I do believe there are guides and people, on the other side, like helping us, but there are signs, right? So I think it's just being in tune and paying attention and just, I don't believe in coincidences.
Mhm.
I don't think there are any. I think they're all
Synchronicities.
synchronicities. Exactly. So if you believe that and you honor that, I think you can get much closer to your intuition.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. As the out as above, so below. It might show up inside your body as a feeling and an energetic, a felt sense, but it could show up out there too as a reflection.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. As above, so below. That's right.
yeah, cool. Self care. What's that mean for you and for your clients that you work with as a crisis coach?
Yeah. So self-care, it's so interesting, right? Because I'm like, I need a self-care coach sometimes, even though I know how to do it, right? But, as a solo mom and full-time executive and running a nonprofit and being on a board, there's not a lot of time. But what I do with my clients is really, I do what's called a joy list. What's that? I'm like, just take a piece of paper out and write down all the things that bring you joy. Take a deep breath, right? And just like what brings you joy, jot them down. When you run out of stuff, take another deep breath and write down some more. And they kind of keep coming like, oh, and this brings me joy and that brings me joy. So I would say when you feel like you're in need of self care, which should be a regular practice, and they're like, well, what does that mean? What do I do? Do I have to go get a massage? Whatever. I'm like, no, like pull out your joy list. Your joy list can be turning on a song or, some tunes that you love, or take a bath, or be still. Like for me, self care sometimes is just finding 10 minutes to be quiet and still. My self care is also like I love going to my annual spiritual retreat or something like that. It could be anything that literally brings joy to your heart. And so I think, because sometimes you like think it's like a chore, I'm like, actually, it's not. It could be 5 minutes a day. And when I think about it, I'm like, well, I should do more, but like it sounds really ridiculous and silly, but like going to work, I find myself listening to Disney music. And I'm like, why the hell am I listening to Disney music?
Oh,
But I realize it's because coming off of the weekend, when I'm playing it all weekend with my kids, I feel close to,
yeah, yeah,
right? So I find myself bopping to Frozen on the way to work, thinking like, what the heck? This is my grown-up time. But I'm like, but it makes me feel closer to my kids. Right. And so little things that just bring you joy to me, there's the micro self-care and then there's the macro self-care. Whether it's for me, travel is mega self-care. Like it's the thing that brings me the most joy. But it's unique to every individual.
everyone first. Yeah, it's interesting around the joy thing. I was just talking to a client a couple of days ago, and he's asking me like about joy. So just get to the level of kids, little kids. It's just get to the level of your kids and just watch them. They're not trying to figure it out. It's not like there's a construct that they can fit into. But eventually they will. Yeah, mostly whatever they do is just short. It's playful. It's fun. It's, in that flow state.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be anything huge. Yeah.
No, not at all. Or long, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Resilience. How do you help clients in the crisis coaching do develop resilience?
Yeah. A lot of the resilience, I think, comes from all the things we talked about already, right? First, you have to accept where you are. Can't accept where you are, you can't be resilient to it, right? It's really breathing through those moments. So a lot of breath work. It's a permission to allow yourself to feel all the feelings that come with the thing that you're struggling with, right? It's also a shift in your mindset about how you look at the situation, right? So I really have learned to look at every situation like, what is this teaching me? What am I supposed to learn from these? Right? Once you can do that, it's kind of like you can move through it so much faster. You're not like getting stuck. You really have to ask yourself, like, okay, this is here to teach me? Like today at work, particularly difficult day. And I thought, okay, I'm like, what was I learning today? And also like, who did I impact in a positive way today? right? So kind of like getting yourself out of your own feelings. I do a lot of mantras with people, the power of a mantra. It sounds so simple, but it really, like my son this morning was in sort of a negative space. I'm like, change your language, change your day, and he's like, and I'm like, it's true. Just keep saying things over and over and, or, play a song you love. Like I can snap out of a mode just from music, So it's all these things, but it really is about, I wrap that all up in perspective. When you can change your perspective on how you look at a situation, what questions you ask yourself, how you change the dynamic of how you're thinking about it, whatever, it gives you a perspective to move through it in a different way.
So how might you hold the simulator the tensions of opposites? And that's just something I think for shape is like allow what is, but also you can do a state change by breath work, mantra, music, dance, whatever music, movement, whatever it happens, whatever practices you do. So how do you integrate like, hey, this is what it is, feel your feelings, and you can also change your state.
Yeah. I think it's you just said the formula, right? So it's kind of like helping them understand the framework and then really like teaching them how do you do that? You have to again honor where you're at and give yourself permission to hate it, be angry at it, feel all the feelings, but they have to move through you. Like I teach my kids, it's like a basketball. You want that basketball to keep going through the net. You don't want it to get stuck in the net. Right. And often those emotions get stuck in the net. And so it's just helping, helping the clients just give themselves permission by asking the right questions. Like, can you allow yourself to be okay with this? How does it feel in your body? Can you give yourself permission to let these things go? And then you sort of tie it into the state changes, which is, like Tony Robbins does a lot of like priming or what have you. And it's like, yeah, you can set up your day in a different way just by like turning on something that changes your mood, and again, it's like acknowledgement, accepting where you are, you know, being willing to look at it differently, and then being available to do the work to change it.
Now you're in New York. You do your personal crisis counseling coaching there. Is it virtual? Like, do you work with people in the city only or in the state only? Or can you work with people outside of this?
Yeah, I mean, we're global, so
Look,
there's
you can work not just the US, but cool.
correct.
Okay. So Zoom helps you or whatever platform you use to.
Yeah, I mean, definitely meet with people in person. Sometimes it's just phone calls, sometimes it could be Zooms. It just kind of depends on what the person wants. Yeah,
You also can see like, if someone's listening to this, but they're not in the city, can they still work with you? The answer is obviously yes.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah. So you also CEO and founder of a nonprofit, which is empowering women by turning adversity into strength, called Hire. Can you talk a little bit about why you founded the nonprofit and the nonprofit does?
sure. Yeah, so, like I said, by day, I'm a chief people officer. That's my bread and butter. And I built my coaching practice to support executive women going through crisis. So people who were just like me, who really had to fight it and no one talks about it and that kind of thing. And then I mentioned earlier, I sit on the board of one of the largest victims assistance organizations in the country. I'm very proud board member here, and we serve more, people who are coming out of abusive relationships. We serve those who are in need of shelter, and you know, I realized that there's coaching that we can offer people. Coaching can be very expensive. So I'm covering the executive side. We're covering more of the people who need shelter, but there's a gap in the middle. So what about the professional women who are going through crisis? They can't really afford expensive coaching, but they also wouldn't qualify for more of what the services are from a shelter perspective or what have you. What are we doing for them? So that was sort of the genesis of Hire. My partner Yenvi and she approached me one day, and we decided to start this nonprofit together to really support those types of women. So it's women who are kind of going through something, but they have the wherewithal to show up to do the work, right? To really like put their effort in to change their mindset and develop the tools, etc. And so we do this in a couple of ways. Um, we offer group and personalized coaching. We have about 5 master coaches on the team who offer their own unique ways of coaching, which really helps give us a diverse kind of set of tools to really give to our clients. We also are developing an ecosystem of partners. So say somebody comes to us, we put them through the program, they're sort of like in a much better state, but we realize now they want a career change and they need more of a career coach. We might refer them out to a career coach who's willing to do something either, for free as well, or maybe at a lower rate, something like that. So we're developing that ecosystem. And then over time, our third pillar is really going to be around financial literacy. So we find that so often women won't leave difficult situations because of the lack of financial literacy. So over time, we want to be able to offer that to them as well. We have our first few women going through the nonprofit now and the program. We're working on fundraising, so every donation counts. And, we really want to do this because our vision is that for every woman that we impact, she then impacts 10 other women, for example, because she's now empowered. She's going to pass those tools on to her daughters, her family members, et cetera. And it's just a ripple effect around the world to have more women being able to have the courage and stand in their power. And that's how we really want to, broaden our impact across the globe.
Now, is the nonprofit for New York residents only, or is it also global like yours?
It's also global. Yeah, it's global. We have coaches who are across the United States, and we have a couple in Europe as well.
Great.
Uh, so different time zones, and we do it virtually. For the nonprofit, we do it virtually right now. And so, yeah, we're available.
Excellent. So if people want to learn more about the nonprofit and donate a portion of the nonprofit, we find more information.
Yeah. So our website is www.liftherhigher.org, and you can find everything there.
And how does your personal crisis go through?
You can find it under my name, danacodispoti.com.
Fantastic. So for a listening audience, if there's a woman in crisis, she's an executive, and she's like, I don't know what to do next. It's just as simple as called in or emailed in, and you guys can just have a discovery call and see if it's a good fit and go from there.
Exactly. Yeah. People find me from all different ways, but yeah, you can just reach out to me on my website, or you can give me a call or email me, and we'll have a discovery call, see if we're meant to work together, or if not, I'll point you in the right direction because I have a lot of colleagues and friends who do this as well. And all of us, our mission is to really just help and empower our women and help them through these difficult times.
Great. What if it's a family member or friend who's like, I'm looking for a fantastic resource. Dana sounds awesome. Do you do calls with them for the purposes of them learning more about beauty, and then you shoot to their sister, mother, brother? No, it's not brother, friend, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's case by case, right? Because you don't want to mix too many things there. But yes, certainly. And or I will say, you know what, this is too close or something like that. Let me send you over to this person who can support you even better. So that first call is for anybody, and I'm wide open. And then, we have to see what makes sense because often too, there's a lot of trust that needs to be established in terms
Of
of there's
course.
so much private information that we share in these sessions, and we want to make sure the main goal is that people feel safe, right, with who they're working with. And so it's a judgment call for myself and for the person, whether it's a match or not. And if not, I'm always going to help to try to get them in the right place.
That's fantastic. I love the mission. Dan, it's been great to talk to you. Is there any last things you'd like to share at the viewing audience about either your personal crisis coaching or higher content?
No, I think first of all, thank you for having me. I think the more we get our message out and our mission out, the more I think we can impact and do well in the world. So thank you for helping us share. And I wish you all the best.
Great. Great to see you, Dan.
You too. Be well.